So we had a look at push notifications and we're able to send these test messages to Android and iOS, which is of course great. Now let's see what we can do with those messages. In the last lecture, I added init state here in the chat screen to request for notification permissions with help of that Firebase messaging package. We need that on iOS. We don't need it on Android, but we need that on iOS in order to receive and work with messages. I also called configure on that Firebase messaging object. Now, of course, we're not limited to just getting messages, tapping on them, and opening our app, even though that already is not too bad. But configure here actually has a couple of arguments we can pass to it. And those will be triggered upon different events, and you find more information in the Firebase messaging Flutter package documentation. Here, under receiving messages, you learn when which method is triggered. You see that onMessage, which is another argument you can pass in, is always triggered whenever you receive a message and the app is running in the foreground. So whenever the app is currently open. For example, if you have an app with different areas, you could use that to navigate the user from the profile part to the chat part or anything like that. Now, if the app is in the background or terminated, onResume or onLaunch is fired. Now, for Android, it is worth noting that this will only fire if you did add this extra metadata to your outgoing message, and I will come back to that in a second. So let's configure that. Let's add onMessage to handle messages which we get whilst the app is running in the foreground. And here we'll get our message. So let's just print message here. This message will be a map, by the way, full of different data. And it actually wants me to add a return statement here because it expects to get back a future. I can't just return like this. I will also specify onLaunch, which should be triggered if the app was terminated and we got a message. So I'll also print my message here and return. And we also got onResume, where we get our message, which we can print, and which we can return here. So these are these free handlers, these free functions you can define that will trigger upon different events. Now let me save this and kill the app and restart and rebuild it entirely for my iPhone here so that I have the latest version on the iPhone. I want that so that I can also kill it there and still see if that all works correctly. So let's wait for that rebuild process to finish. And now with the app running again on iOS here on the right, let's test those different handlers. Now the app is running in the foreground here. So I'll now send another message through this test console, duplicate this last notification, review it, and publish it. And you won't see anything here because the app is in the foreground. Because of that, I also get no notification here. But you see information being printed here. You see that is in the end my message data. We get a sender ID, and then here we got some information. We get the title, for example. We got the body here. Body, does this work? And we could have added more metadata, though which data exactly you can add depends on the platform you're targeting, and you find more information on that and which fields you can set where in the Firebase Cloud Messaging docs. But you see, we're getting information about our message here, and therefore here in onMessage, which was the function being triggered, you can now do whatever you want to do upon this message. Navigate somewhere else in your application, show some dialogue to the user, do whatever you want to do with that incoming message. So next, I will switch to a different app. I'm switching to the browser here again. So the app is now not terminated, but it's running in the background. And I will do this again. Duplicate this, review this, and publish. And back here, we see the message coming in here at the top. So this also works. And if I now tap on it, it opens my app. But now, and that's the difference to before, we again see that data being logged here. The same data as before, but this is now coming from onResume, from this function. Because that's getting triggered if your app is running in the background and the user then taps on an incoming notification. And again, you can now do whatever you want to do in there, navigate the user somewhere else, and so on. Now let's see onLaunch, which, according to the docs here, will run whenever the app was terminated. So let me do that. So I killed the application off screen. Now I'll duplicate this, review this, and publish it again. And we see the message coming in. And if I tap on it, I restart the app. And we don't see the console log here, unfortunately, because by killing the app, I, well, lost the connection. But you would see it if we still had the connection. And of course, this code executed on the device. So again, you can do here whatever you want to do. Show the user a message. Do whatever you want to do. So that is iOS. Now let's test this on Android. And for this, I'll switch back to the Pixel emulator here. And now let's restart the app there. Now, one important note, as mentioned in the Firebase messaging docs, so in the docs for our Flutter package we're using, you have to add this extra data to the notification in order to make sure that your code in onResume and onLaunch executes and you get your message information there if a user taps the notification with your app being terminated or in background. So that's something we'll have to do. Now, before we do that, let's see the foreground mode though. Here is the app running. And I'll clear that so that we can see everything new that's coming in. And now again, I will go back here. And actually, it's now enough to just duplicate the Android only notification because I only want to test it there. And I'll publish this. And I don't see anything here because it's running in the foreground. That's why we don't get the message here. But in the log, you see notification data here. Now, we still got that fatal failed to find callback error, but we clearly did receive this notification object or this notification map here. So this on message code clearly executed, and you could do whatever you want to do there. So this would work. So this most likely is not an error with your code, but some internal problem which still doesn't cause any problems here. It still works, as you can tell. This data here is visible, so the code in onMessage clearly executed. Now, if I would put this app into background mode, so it's still open in the task manager, but it's in the background, and I tried sending this again, if I publish this, you will see that the message arrived here. But if I tap it, the app opens, but we don't see any output here. So now our code in onResume did not execute. And that makes sense because we need to add this extra data to our outgoing message. So let's send another message by duplicating it again. But now before reviewing and publishing, let's go to additional options and under key here, add click action. And as a value, add Flutter notification click, written like this. And now review this. Before you publish, make sure you're running in the background. So now, publish. Notification is there. Click on it. App opens. And now if I scroll up a bit, this here is the notification information. We got the notification information we're printing here in onResume. Now let's also see what happens if I kill this application. Of course, we won't see anything in the log here, but we should still get the notification, and clicking it should at least open the app. And I can also tell you, just as before, of course, onLaunch will execute in that case. So the notification is here. We click on it. The app restarts. Now, again, as I mentioned, we don't see anything in the log here because our app is disconnected, but the code in onLaunch would run and you could do whatever you want to do upon this notification. So that is push notifications in a nutshell. That is what you can do with them. This shows your options as a developer. This shows you how to set them up. And of course, there are a lot of details which you can configure. A lot of things you can fine-tune to your likings and to your requirements. And for that, check out the Firebase Messaging Flutter package documentation here to learn more about it. But also make sure you dive, for example, in the Firebase Cloud Messaging documentation here to learn all about that, because that also shares many useful details about what you can configure, which kind of messages you can send, which kind of data you can put into messages, and much more.